Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. Still Tuesday. We're doing part 2 of testimony. We're going to jump in. But first, if you're watching on YouTube, you know the drill. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video, share it with your friends, and you can ring my bell if you want notifications of when I post new content. Just click that little bell icon. Music fact of the day: Only the Lonely was intended to be sung by Elvis, but he turned it down. Roy Orbison went on to sing it, and Elvis called Orbison quite simply the greatest singer in the world. Before we went to lunch, we had Deputy Coulter Cannon on the stand. He was the one that responded to the attempt on Tammy in her driveway October 9th, 2019, just 10 days before she would end up and be killed. When he first got to the scene, he drove through the area just looking for anybody that matched the description of the suspect Tammy described on that 911 call. He then went to the Daybell residence and met Tammy at the front door. He got all of her information, and she said she had been getting groceries out of her car and saw a man at the rear of her vehicle. She asked what he wanted. The person didn't say anything, then held up the gun. She heard 2 pops, and then she yelled for Chad. Eventually, Chad came outside. The deputy did not talk to Chad, but Chad was there. He was standing with his son near the kitchen area, about 10 or 15 feet away from where the deputy and Tammy were talking. He said that Chad would have heard the conversation they were having. He said Chad never attempted to talk to him, and that struck him as odd that Tammy had just been victimized, and he took no action to protect her. It didn't play into his investigation, but it did stand out. He walked around Tammy's car looking for any kind of shell casings or paintball marks and found nothing. He then talked to Tammy's son-in-law, Joseph Murray, who was across the street. He was chopping wood. He heard Tammy scream. He saw a man run to the north on the property. The deputy left the scene after really finding nothing. The next year, he did participate in that search warrant on January 3rd at Chad's home. He helped sift through the snow to find any evidence of a gun being used in that attempt. Now, on cross, y'all, it got heated, and I think that this deputy was over this cross exam. But Pryor said the initial report you made was brief, but you made a subsequent report afterwards. What was the time frame between the two? The witness doesn't recall the time in between. He said maybe a month or 2. Pryor points out that he didn't wear a body cam and says, "You're a patrol officer at standard issue." The witness says it was broken. Pryor asked, "When did it break?" He says, "I'm not sure, but I did inform my sergeant." Pryor said, "You went on a call. You didn't have a body cam to accurately portray what was happening that day." Then Pryor asked the judge to show the officer the report he wrote. And bringing up the initial report, Pryor says, when you testified for the prosecution, you said paintball or gun incident, and you added the word gun. He said Tammy said it could possibly be a gun. Pryor asked, when did she say that? And the witness said in her 911 call. She said gun as well. Pryor says dispatch said paintball gun. When you spoke to her, she said paintball gun, pulled the trigger a couple of times and ran off. Then Pryor says a couple of months later, you extended that report. The officer said he was asked by a supervisor to put more detail in that report. Pryor asked if this was after the death of Tammy Daybell, and he said yes. Pryor said, was this such a significant issue with a paintball gun that required you to write 2 or 3 more paragraphs about an incident that happened 60 days earlier? Or did they put you up to putting in more detail because they were trying to get you to allege in some way there may have been a gun there? Isn't that what the police are trying to do here? There's an objection that's sustained. The defense says when you revised the report, you mentioned she was standing at the back of her car and she believed it to be a paintball gun. So you've added the word gun, and what you're really doing, she told you it was a paintball gun, and the 911 dispatcher said it was a paintball gun. Pryor asked why he put this caveat in there saying that it's believed to be a paintball gun. Then Pryor just says, you knew it was a paintball gun. There was no gun there that day, was there? There's an objection is sustained. The defense points out Chad and their son went out to see what was outside. The witness says it was just Chad. Pryor asked if he thinks it's unusual for Chad to run out and see what's going on. And the witness says, no, it was unusual. He was just standing there when he was talking to Tammy. Then Pryor asked, do you know Chad's personality? Do you know he's somewhat of a shy person? Do you know he's a humble person? There's an objection is sustained. Pryor says you modified your initial statement. You said the person was 5'10", 190 pounds. Where did you get that he was 6 foot and 200 pounds? The witness said, I put in there it was approximate. But Pryor asked, why did you add 2 more inches and more pounds? The witness says he was just going off his memory. Pryor says, or is it possible your supervisor said we need a greater report with more detail to point the finger at Alex Cox? There's an objection, is sustained. Pryor says it didn't fit the description of Alex Cox. The witness says that's not why I put that approximate height and weight. Pryor says, then you say Joseph Murray lived catty corner and you talked to him. He said he was cutting wood. He heard a scream and saw someone run around the north side of the property. Would it surprise you? Joseph told a different story than what you're saying. And the witness says, it would surprise me. Pryor asked if he asked Joseph Murray if he heard a gunshot. And the witness said, no, I asked what he saw. Pryor says, it's an important fact that he saw someone running. You had to change your report. Pryor asked, wouldn't it be important if he heard a gunshot? And the witness says, he wouldn't have heard a gunshot if it was a paintball gun. And Pryor says, exactly. He said, this narrative you're trying to suggest to this jury was a real gun. You know it's a paintball gun. There's an objection, is sustained. Pryor asked, what information from the reports suggests this wasn't a paintball gun? Give me a couple of reasons you think this was a real gun. The witness says, Tammy's call to 911. Pryor says, so again, you know, this was a paintball gun. And the witness says, no, I don't. Pryor replays the 911 calls, both of them, and says, I heard the word paintball gun and paintball gun. Where was the word gun used? And the witness says later in the call. Pryor says, I heard the call stop. And the witness says, yeah, because you stopped it. Pryor says, so there's the word gun in there. And the witness says, I believe so. He says, in your initial report, you said paintball gun. Now you say it's a gun. There's an objection. It's sustained. Pryor asked if he talked to any other potential subjects about this. Did you talk to a neighbor about the husband of a dog kidnapper or an autistic child roaming the neighborhood causing some issues? He said no. I believe it was established this young man was at home that night or something. Pryor says, you would agree with me, finally, that this was a paintball gun. And the witness says, I don't know if it was a paintball gun or a real gun. On redirect, the prosecution says, in the second report, how long after the incident did you write it? And the witness says a couple of months or so. The prosecution says, as a part of law enforcement, as a deputy, is it expected you will conform to your superiors? And if they ask you to write another report, you do so? He says, yes. They ask, were you fed any information to put in the report? He says, no. They move on. You were asked about a body cam. Yours was broken. They also point out Fremont County Sheriff's Office does not have a policy requiring deputies to wear a body cam. And the witness verifies that. They ask why he used paintball in his report but looked for shell casings. And the witness says Tammy heard 2 pops and screamed. He can't rule out what Tammy saw was a paintball gun or a real gun. The prosecution asked, you were asked if Joseph Murray heard a gunshot. The witness said it didn't seem important at the time to ask him, and he didn't bring up that he heard one, and it's likely he would have. I don't understand what Pryor's obsession is about this paintball gun. I guess you could say that Tammy dying 10 days later could point to the fact that he and Alex were in on this attempted murder of Tammy that we all believe to be the case. But still, if you've got Alex pretty much being at that scene, it seems to me like you would say, yeah, Alex took a shot at her. My client did not. But here we are. The next witness, Officer Alyssa Greenhalgh. She works for the Rexburg Police Department as a patrol officer. She responded to Tammy's death at the Daybell house. An unattended death is a death where the person is not under physician's care. Her duty is to respond before the coroner and detectives to look for any sign of foul play, such as obvious injuries, the house being a mess, looking like signs of a struggle. And she also goes there and requests any resources needed based on what she finds. They admit the 911 call made by Garth and Chad Daybell. I'm going to play that now.
911, where's your emergency?
We're at 202 North, 1900 East.
What's going on?
We just found my mom. She's on the ground frozen, or she's stiff, and I don't know.
Are you in Madison County or Fremont County?
Hello, I'm Chad, the husband. She's clearly dead. We don't
Oh,
know.
sorry. Okay. Okay. Are you in Rexburg or because your address shows
Fremont
Rexburg
County.
address, but you're in Fremont County?
It's a mile past
Okay.
the line. Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh. Yeah, she's not even close.
Okay. Can I get your name?
Chad, Daybell. Oh, man. Oh.
Okay, Chad. I'm going to get somebody out to you right now, okay?
Is that the corner where the blinking yellow light is with the red house?
Yes, sir. Red house on the corner.
Yes.
Blinking yellow light.
Right.
Okay. We'll get somebody out to you, okay? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
If you need anything else, you call me back, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
When the officer showed up, Chad and Garth were in the living room. The first conversation she had was just asking where Tammy was and what happened. Garth and Chad both walked her back to where Tammy's body was. She said Chad was more emotional than Garth. He was sobbing, gasping for air. Garth was more reserved and really didn't say much. Now, Chad looked at the jury when she said this. That's one of the few times I've seen him just look directly over after a question had been asked. She said Tammy's feet were hanging off the bed and the mattress was pushed off the box springs just a bit. Tammy was covered with a blanket up to her shoulders. Chad said she woke up around midnight coughing. She vomited in the floor and then moved into the bathroom and continued vomiting. Just a trigger warning, we're talking about the death of Tammy Daybell. So if this bothers you, this is your time to check out and come back tomorrow. Definitely don't want anybody uncomfortable with what we're going to talk about. So that was your warning. Chad said he got up to help her clean and then went back to bed. At 5:40 a.m., he felt the blankets shift off of him in bed, and he thought that Tammy fell off the bed. He tells her to get back in the bed, and she didn't respond. Chad then turned the lights on and saw she wasn't responding. He said Tammy partially fell off the bed because her feet were wrapped in the sheets and her feet were still on the bed, but the side of her head was on the floor. He said after he turned on the lights, he checked her and then called Garth to help move her back onto the bed. The officer said that Tammy's body matched Chad's description. She checked for a pulse. There was none. Her skin was colder than room temperature and she was stiff. She had pink foam coming out of her mouth and it trickled down the side of her face, and it was clear Tammy was deceased. She asked Chad if Tammy had any serious medical conditions. Chad said she had a bad cold, but did not like going to the doctor, and she had fallen in the driveway a couple of months before and saw a doctor for that. She was also going through menopause, low blood pressure, and according to Chad, she was having fainting spells. He didn't mention any shaking fits or any disruption to her sleep patterns. She notified 2 detectives. That's just standard procedure. They told her to take photos and then let the coroner decide about an autopsy. She looked at medications in the home while she waited for the coroner to arrive, and she didn't see anything suspicious about the scene in general. Chad and Tammy's son Garth was within earshot of the conversation with Chad and the deputy. He didn't try to add anything to the conversation. They show a series of photos of Tammy. Last year, we were able to see these. This year, they moved everybody from the side of the courtroom nearest the jury to the other side, which would be the defense side. And then the prosecution turned their monitors so people behind them couldn't see. I think a lot of that now is just because this is streaming. They don't want anything to accidentally end up online, which is a good thing. So I'm going to describe the photos just because this is what was testified to today. Murder is not pretty. So they show photos of Tammy laying in the bed as the officer first saw her. The second photo was a close view of Tammy's face with that blood and the foam on her cheek. The third photo shows how her arms were lying when uncovered by the blanket. By the fourth photo, the coroner had arrived and she was completely uncovered. It was just to show how she was positioned on the bed. It also shows those box springs shifted. And typically that's not how your bed is laid out, but it was consistent with Chad saying they put her back on the bed. The fifth photo showed the other side of her face and her right ear, which did have some discoloration. They show a close up showing blood around her nose and mouth. It also shows that the pink foam flowed down the left side of her face. She never responded to an unattended death with foam coming out of the mouth, so she wanted to document that. She took another photo after Tammy's face had been cleaned up. And the last photo was at the mortuary, and some time had passed, which showed bruising and color changes to her. There were bruises on the top of the forehead, the mouth, the neck, and the chest area. We also know there were some bruises behind her arms. She had rigor mortis. There's a debate on how you say it. I say rigor mortis, but after the coroner moved her, the officer noticed Tammy had lividity on her legs and lower back. That's the pooling of blood. To the officer, that meant she had been lying on her back for a significant amount of time after she passed away. The witness was told by Chad that Tammy was on depression medicine and over-the-counter stuff, as well as natural remedies. On cross, Pryor says at the bottom of your report, you say the coroner determined an autopsy was not needed unless the family wanted one. The witness agrees. He asked if they discussed there were old bruises on Tammy's arm, and the coroner said they were from sometime before the incident. The witness says, I wasn't aware that the coroner knew the age of these bruises. Pryor asked, when you look for the medication, you saw the depression medicine, essential oils, over-the-counter pain relievers, cough medicine, and that's important because Chad said she was having coughing fits. The witness agrees. He also points out there was an essential oil respiratory blend and a supplement for bruising and sore muscles. Pryor points out Chad was far more shook up than anybody else in the house and reiterates that mattress lined up with Chad's version of events, saying that he and Garth put Tammy back on the bed. He asked if Chad told the witness Tammy was having falls. No. He also points out she didn't have a body cam on. He asked if she's issued one. She says yes. He asked if it was broken, and the witness says it was charging at the time. Pryor says that Chad mentioned Tammy had a cold and low blood pressure with fainting spells occasionally. He asked if he mentioned Tammy had anemia. She says no. He asked if the witness researched the pink foam. She says no. He says, so you didn't research that someone could have a condition which showed foaming in the mouth? She said no. He points out there's no indication of a struggle, and also that Chad told the coroner Tammy was having shaking fits with seizures. He also points out that the officer put in her report that Emma said her and her mom were taking clogging classes and that Tammy was slowing down in the last couple of months. He asked if there appeared to be any foul play. She said no. That was it for cross. On redirect, they talk about essential oils and point out they didn't have any information outside what Chad told her about Tammy using these essential oils. The witness says no. They also ask her if there was any indication of how long those essential oils had been in the home, and she said no. I think we're leading up to the coroner testifying for Tammy Daybell. Seems like that's where we're headed. So we'll see what tomorrow brings. We'll be live in the morning chatting before testimony starts. I'll be doing lives at breaks. That way at lunchtime, I can get this first part in for those of you that are working, want to listen on your lunch break. Also, it just helps with my crazy weeks that I got coming up. But we will see you soon. Have a good evening.